Today on Lessons in Leadership, we are talking with Tanya Miner, who has spent over 25 years in the hospitality industry. The past 10 years has been as a director with Hilton. She has recently formed an LLC and decided to go out on her own in the hospitality industry, so taking a leap of faith. But we have some great conversation around lessons in leadership and some insight from her. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Thanks for joining us today. Today, I am talking with Tanya Miner, who has been an executive director with Hilton Hotels for a number of years. And if you've just watched the beginning of this, you've gotten all the details on her. So, Tanya, thanks for joining me today. And I want to jump right in and just ask you the first question. Do you have a particular leadership style that you subscribe to when you're working with your teams?
Sure. Yeah, I would say, when we talk about in other relationships, love languages, when it comes to my leadership relationship, my love language is collaboration.
Hmm.
So I'm a highly collaborative individual. I try to be transparent too. That's obviously really important quality when you're trying to work in collaboration. Transparency is huge. So yeah.
When you say transparency, can you go into a little bit more detail on what you need to be transparent with? Is it like the details of the job or just with sometimes the emotion of leading a team, the personal interactions?
That's a great question. So I think, one of my favorite leadership podcasts that I follow, you may be aware of Craig Groeschel's leadership
Hmm.
podcast. He's a pastor out of Oklahoma, and he always says that whatever you do, be authentic, because
Hmm.
people would rather follow somebody who are themselves than somebody who's trying to fake it. And
Yeah.
so that really helps me show up authentically as a leader with my teams. And they know, about, my life too. It's important to share who I am
Mm.
as a person and what's important to me. But that being said, if there are moments where I am feeling emotional, it's not always appropriate to show that, right? And
Yeah.
so there is that fine line of when it's appropriate to be fully authentic that way. But when I talk about transparency, it's usually the why. So when I'm setting about a strategy, I don't want to be that leader that just, here's the strategy, now go do it.
Mm.
It's the why. This is the information that I've been gathering or that we've been gathering as a team. This is what the story it's telling us. And because of this story, this is the strategy. And most of the times I've hopefully collaborated around that strategy, right? This is a strategy that we agree is going to make the best sense for us to achieve that end goal. And then getting the buy-in. But it's, sharing, here's what the data told us. This is what we're seeing in the marketplace. This is what I'm hearing from customers, what I'm hearing from team members. And so with all of that in mind, let's move forward in this way. And so it's that kind of transparency, just sharing the why behind moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I did a video, a long form video about that a couple months ago. Sharing the why is huge.
Mhm.
There's an interesting story that I learned out of Japan, and this is, gosh, man, probably more than a decade ago. But one of the major airports in Japan was plagued with delays because of weather and just,
Mhm.
and they were trying to work through that and get better on their departures and stuff. And so what they ended up doing was they would put, those electronic signs that just kind of run a message across them with the
Mhm.
red lights. They would put up signs at the back of these long lines and with messages that said something like, "Man, this line sure is long, isn't it? Well, we're dealing with da 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 da." And they reduced complaints in the airport by over 90%
Wow,
just
that's
because people
significant.
knew the why.
Right.
Oh, wow, there's only three people at the counter. That makes sense. I don't mind waiting another hour, because
Right.
there's nothing they can do about that. So,
Right.
yeah, that's really cool. I know that you have led teams of people before. So, as a leader, how did you, along with the authenticity and transparency, how did you build team cohesion with the members of your team?
I think the collaboration is being the bigger piece of that. So
Mm.
something that's really popular in my industry is a daily business review where everybody, I'm in sales. And so everybody that has a piece of business that they want to transact, they need to bring it to this daily business review. and present it to everybody. And usually it's, we already set up kind of, here are the parameters. And if you're within these parameters, you can quote and go, and you're fully, empowered to do that, which empowerment always a huge key in getting that cohesion. But for those pieces of business that fall underneath those guidelines, but might still make sense for one reason or another, they bring that to the daily business review, present it. Why is it a good piece of business? Why does it make sense for us to consider it when it doesn't fall into the guideline, right? And what I have found, if I on purpose try to be the last one to speak, I want the team to talk about it. I want to hear what they think together. If it's, and what I found by doing that is everybody starts to consider, as opposed to just their market segment, just as opposed to their corner of the world, it gets them thinking about what's the best interest for the whole. Does it make sense, not just for that individual because they want to have a win in their market, but does it make sense for the hotel as a whole? Is it a good business decision for everyone? And so it gets people out of just thinking about their own line of business to thinking about the bigger picture.
Kind of pulling back to that 30,000 foot view and considering a lot of different things. So then when you are the last person to speak, are you listening to everybody else around the circle and then saying, how can I weave this together? Or how do these play off of each other? Is that something that you're thinking about during the meeting?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I love, and even when I will speak, there was a team member that I had once, and she was younger and, greener, kind of newer in her role. And I was recapping what everybody had stated about a certain piece of business. It was a piece of business that people didn't necessarily care for. They were like, yeah, we think we can get something better, And a lot of times that is the question is, okay, here's the piece of business. Does everybody in the room think we could do better than this, or should we go ahead and take the bird in the hand, right?
Right.
Anyway, this team member, she actually pushed back, kind of came back to me. I was the tiebreaker, if you will. And I said, based on what everybody has said, and I agree with this point is probably a good idea for us to turn that down. And this new team member brought up something that none of us had thought about. And she pushed back on me and she said, Tanya, I don't agree with you. And it's interesting because I was still kind of new in my role. And so people weren't sure about who I was. And so people's eyes got big, like, oh my gosh, she's challenging our new boss.
Right.
And she's like,
this is going to be great.
And this is why, right? They're like, bracing in. And I really respected her for that. It didn't necessarily tip the scale per se. But, so I gave her my, response to that. But then I asked, I said, but I'm really curious what everybody else thinks, given what this person just shared. What does everybody else think? And everybody else still thought, well, we do appreciate that point of view, but we're still going to stick with the decision. And that's what everybody decided to do. But at the end of the day, I still have power of veto. Even if everybody at that point said, I still don't think it's a good idea. And I could see the bigger picture down the road, or I could see where it's going to hit a metric that was important, then I would override. And I would say, actually, I do think let's go ahead and do it and see what happens. And if anything, it's a learning, I would say the biggest thing is I'm not afraid to myself make a mistake, but I'm not afraid to let somebody move forward on something, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. If I can see, okay, the bridge is not going to collapse. It might, get bumpy, but it's not going to collapse. But I want this person to go ahead and move forward with what they're wanting to do, to see what happens. One, because, hey, prove me wrong. I'm happy.
Right. Yeah.
And two, so that we can all learn from it. Of course, that person, who's responsible for that project can learn the most, right? And so what went well, what didn't? Let's play Monday morning quarterback. What would we do differently next time? And so when I can see that it's going to be a really valuable learning opportunity and there's not going to be a huge risk to the organization, I'll let the team member move forward even when I don't agree. Yeah. Yeah. And then to parlay that, I've often instituted my own rule. I don't necessarily share this with the team because they could take advantage of it. But
now they're all going to know.
Right. If 2 to 3 people, if the majority of the room, if I, make a decision or I'm, going down a line of thinking, and two or more people in the room disagree, even if it's not what I would do, I'll go ahead and do what they think is the best.
Mm.
Not every time, but a lot of
Right.
times I feel like, you know what, the majority here, just because I'm their leader doesn't make me the know-all of it, of everything, right?
Right.
So, and they're talking, frankly, and I think this is a key to remember, they're talking to our customers more than I am. I'm in meetings, I'm doing reports, I'm working with my team. I'm not in that direct line with customers as much as my team is. And so I've got to let them take that leap of faith, even if it's not what I would do.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. That brings up something I heard about in the news, or I follow some military history just because I'm kind of interested in that sort of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a policy that the IDF in Israel has, and not to get into politics or anything like that, but in Israel, when they have the hierarchy of, the generals, the lieutenants, and whatever that is. Um, but when there's a battle or something going on, the commander who is on the ground dealing with the situation then
Mm-hmm.
takes rank over anybody else who's at a desk behind,
Oh, okay.
because the person on the ground has the best information in real time. And so
Right.
then they just, and kind of alluding to what you were just saying. So you said something kind of alluding to follow-up conversations, how, you take that green person who wants to do something, new, and you're not real sure about it. I'm a big person on follow-up conversations after a
Mm-hmm.
decision's been made, or after a mistake has been made, or sometimes more than often after something has gone really well. I like doing follow-up conversations with people as well, and just either reinforcing or adding support. So what examples do you have of follow-up conversations for either good things or bad things? Because I think sometimes those can be even more important and more valuable.
Sure. Early in my leadership development, I would say I was much better about having the tough conversation and then having the follow-up conversation. And it was always, how do you feel about what happened? I
Mhm.
understand it didn't go your way. How do you feel about it? And they just want to be heard. I'm not going
Mm.
to try to prove my point of why I didn't share their decision or their belief. It's just to let them have their moment to be heard.
Yeah.
And not for me to belabor, well, I want to do it this way and this is why, over and
Right.
over again. That's not helpful to them necessarily. And then, it's even following up maybe after that particular group or whatever, we have a lot of data that comes back after occupancy and things like that. Like, how did that week perform and how would have it performed had we done X, Y, and Z?
Hmm.
And so also showing that, later on down the road saying, okay, this week did turn out the way we were hoping it would have. Had we taken your group, it would have turned out this way. And so, can you understand now why we make some of these decisions? Just to make sure that they know it's data backed for the most
Yeah.
part, right?
Yeah.
What I wasn't so good at, and one of my mentors was really instrumental in helping me with, is celebrating. I would celebrate kind of in general. You'd have like the gong you would ring when somebody would get a new contract or something like that, and we'd clap all around, but making it personal, I was not very
Yeah.
good at that. And so something that I am trying to do now, instead of just having the gong, I would have booking songs. So you pick, and so I would change it up. Like one quarter, maybe it's your favorite movie from the 80s and one of their, the theme song from that movie or something like that. And so when I was turning their piece of business, what we call definite, then I'm playing their song really loud for everybody in the office to hear. And it's their song. So everybody
Right.
knows, oh, that was Andrea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then following up with a personal note and a handwritten note, not just a typed
An
one or
email or
whatever,
something. Yeah.
or I'm on the way to the bathroom and I, give them a fist bump and a note and, congratulate them again. So it's just even just those little things as individuals. And, but then there's still where the team wants to be celebrated as a team together
Yeah.
too. And
Yeah.
so really seeing the value, and they want it a lot more than you think they do. I feel
Oh,
like when
yes.
I
Yes.
was coming up in the ranks, it was like maybe twice a year.
Right.
And now the expectation's like monthly or quarterly, and they want to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And so I really had to change my perspective and my approach on that. No, that wasn't how I was brought up in corporate America, but the corporate America that's coming up behind us, that's what they want, right? So,
Yeah. Well, and if you just think about it, like you know me personally, so you know that I'm a cheerleader. Like I
mm,
love like, yes, that was awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm cheering for you. Let's dump some Gatorade on your head or something silly.
right.
But people, business aside, people love cheerleaders. And I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed that this is something that I've done with a lot of men, and men are uncomfortable with it unless they're comfortable with the person giving the cheerleading. I had an experience. I'm leading a group at our church in some leadership training, and there's one guy who is just really stepping up. And I pulled him aside a couple weeks ago and I said, "Hey, I just want you to know that like I see that you've done X, Y, and Z. The effects have
Mm-hmm.
been one, two, and three, and you're really on your ways to A, B, and C. And I want you to know that I see that and it's valuable and it's really important." And you would
Mm-hmm.
have thought like I gave this guy $1 million. And
Mm-hmm.
so the next week he was helping put the cookies away and moving tables and doing all this stuff. Um, Men don't typically, my experience is men typically don't accept that very well. They're just like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. But
But
men,
some
yeah,
people, they want, it can drive them too. So the other piece of that is,
yeah,
Todd, they respect you and you honored him in that way. And now he wants to please you even more, if that makes
yeah,
sense, or
yep,
show up for you and engage with you in a way that he knows is important to you too.
yes,
So because
absolutely.
you recognized it. And so I think that's part of it too.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit because I know in your industry you have ethnic diversity in the staffs that you've worked with. And
Mhm.
so how do you as a leader build cohesion amongst a team where maybe every single person is different ethnically? And because that can be a challenge when you have just, male and female relationships can be different, but now
Mhm.
you've got people from like one of the guys I interviewed earlier this week. He had a team where every person on the team was from a different continent. It was a global
Mhm.
initiative. And that was
Mhm.
fascinating to listen how they really kind of started to dial in on mindset. People who would think a certain way tended to group together regardless of, Japan, Germany, Ireland, or wherever.
Mhm.
So how did how have you dealt with that in your career as a leader?
I mean, it's really boils down to the basics. It's treat everyone the way they would want to be treated, right? And so, in this day and age, I try really hard to honor people the way that is authentic to them.
Mm,
So, it's it's such an interesting question. It's going to take me a minute because honestly, like I've had some diversity on my teams, but not a ton. I would say when I think about diversity on my teams, it's like, yeah, I have people from different ethnic, a few different ethnic backgrounds, but not as diverse as like what you just explained.
mm,
I would say diversity shows up the most in my industry from the LGBTQ community.
mm,
So there's that piece of it. And so it's obviously increasingly important on me to understand, what is their identity and how do they want to be represented, and making sure that I'm honoring them that way. Um, and then when it comes to an ethnic diversity, I mean, if there is something, I would say like with the Jewish community, understanding that their holidays are different than ours, right?
mm,
And so it could be for the Jewish community, it could be for somebody from the Muslim community, and learning more about how do they celebrate those holidays that are important to them in their community, and
yeah,
making sure that I am not trying to be overdone about it.
right.
But if that is a holiday that's important to them, that they know that they can take that time
Yeah,
to spend with their family or spend it in a way that's meaningful to them, and not be judged about it. Like, yeah, just as important to you as Christmas is important to me, then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, take that time with your family, go and do the things that are important. And hey, I saw that you guys have this tradition. Tell me more about that,
Yeah.
so I'm not just placating to placate, but I'm genuinely curious. And I think that genuine curiosity comes across when I ask them more about where they're from and the different things that are important to them. But I've never come across, fortunately, I've been very lucky because I do treat everybody pretty much always equally, regardless of their background. I've never, I don't think, have had anybody come to me and say, you said something this way, and in my culture, it means this. So
Mm.
I haven't had a ton of experience where there's been conflict in the diversity. It's just making sure that, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
And actually, something did just come to mind. I had a team member who, I don't know if it was ADHD or anyway, it was, one of the recognized mental health disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was starting to show up in her work, and she made me aware of the disability. And so I checked with HR to see if that was in her file, and it hadn't been. And so I asked her, if she needed to have anything from her doctor. Has her doctor told her that she would need special consideration in her workplace, based on her disability and things like that. And she was like, no, nothing at all. But thank you so much for checking. Nobody has ever asked me that.
Mm.
Well, you made me aware of it, so I made sure to, I want to make sure that it's in your file if you feel like that there is a special accommodation that we
Mm-hmm.
can make for you, whether it's how your office is set up, if it's, the time of day you come in or the time of day you leave. Like, help me understand what makes the most sense for your disability when it comes to the work that you do, because we do value the work that you do.
Mm.
So I would say that was probably the only situation I've come across where I've had to better understand something like that.
Yeah. I found, and it again, it depends on the relationship that I have with the person, but I have found just learning a phrase in their language, just because
Mm.
I have been in an incredibly diverse, like the last school district that I worked for was represented by 75 countries and
Oh, wow.
77 languages
Yeah.
just in the district. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got to start learning phrases from different languages and just, good morning, how are you? My favorite one is I can say, where is the bathroom in Arabic? Because of the relationship that I had with the person. We were talking, it was another man and we were making jokes about something and it just came up, like, that's the most important question to learn in any language is where's the bathroom? Because
Oh.
when there's an emergency involving that's really important. And so
Mm-hmm.
that just became the thing. So like every, I don't know, couple weeks, I would see him and I'd, spit that phrase out to him and he'd just start laughing and,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how we make those connections. So, switching gears a little bit again, who is one of the best leaders that you've ever worked for and why were they the best?
Great question. Um, it's funny, it's probably the same leader that my husband we both worked for the same person at different
Mm,
times. And we both highly respect the gentleman. His name's Tyson, and he was a director of sales for me when I was in Salt Lake City. I was his assistant director. And he, I think, one is where I learned the principle of, yeah, go ahead and try it and see what happens.
hmm
Even if you didn't think it was the best idea, he very much was the, if this was your business and
hmm
it was your financial capital involved, what would you do? And then he would let us do it. And then he also was really good about, he set the boundary, or he would set, the strategy and the goals and things like that. But he was always super positive, even when things are really hard. He would, affirm that, yeah, they are indeed hard right now, or we have this challenge, or we have this uphill battle. But he had a really great way of bringing everybody together so that we were all taking up arms together
hmm
and going against, whatever the adversarial situation was, right? Um, I think I only saw him get angry one time in the time that I worked for him, like where he was like truly like legitimately mad
Mm,
at somebody. And it was as a result of some direct insubordination that had happened.
mm,
Like very direct, almost slapping him in the face with it.
mm.
This person's very lucky they didn't get fired. And I think for anybody else, they would have gotten fired. But that was the only time I ever saw him angry. And he's very, well respected in the community because people knew that he was always, yes, yes, let's figure it out. Let's find a way to yes. And, let's keep having the conversation. That's probably another one of the biggest things, working with customers, especially, during the pandemic and coming out of the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic, dealing with cancellations and rebookings and things like that. The key that I learned from him is let's keep having the conversation, even when it doesn't feel comfortable.
Mm.
Even if I'm not saying or you're not saying what we each other wants to hear, let's do it in a respectful way. Let's keep having the conversation. The solution will present itself.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest keys that I learned from him. And then the second one is making sure, regardless of, especially when you're coming in as a new leader to a new office or new organization, is regardless of what maybe their past history might have been, it is now my job to make sure that my team has the tools and the resources, the tools, the training, and the resources to be successful. And so even if somebody, made XYZ mistake and I get feedback, oh, they've always made that mistake. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I haven't trained them. I haven't given them the training and I haven't given them this tool. I haven't given, and so I'll give them that chance to learn, from me or from, a colleague. And then if they still continue to make the mistake, then we got to make a different choice.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's always making sure that I personally know that this person has been given the tools, the training, and resources to be successful. And then if they still aren't, it's a different conversation. But
Yeah. It sounds like Tyson was, he did all of the things that you've talked about. He was collaborative. He
yeah,
was transparent. He was a cheerleader. He was not afraid to take a risk and fail if it meant better learning or coaching or mentoring for somebody underneath him.
yeah,
So
yeah.
very
So
cool. What is one of the leadership experiences that you've learned the most from? And this could be a success or a failure.
I would say, I learned the leader not to be from one of the individuals I would say was a strong leader in my career. I worked with this person for a really, really long time, but they were a micromanager.
Mm,
And uh, and ruled through fear almost like
mm-hmm.
we were all somewhat afraid of this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then when she would try to be your friend, like you just craved that nice side that you
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
saw, right? Because you just never saw it. And so it would create kind of these codependent relationships, which was not healthy at all for anybody. And so I learned the leader not to be, or the things not to do, to not come down on people when they make small mistakes, the way it would, she was this gotcha person, it
Mm,
always felt like
yeah.
she was trying to get you, even when you were, performing. And the challenge was because we would all put up the numbers as her sellers, we would put up these amazing numbers. And before you know it, she's getting director of the year. And we're like, okay, but she's not a good person. Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's so the team that's winning that, right? And so it was almost like, oh, she's being reinforced, like her leadership style to her is being reinforced because she won this award, right?
Right. Right.
But we all were just like, even when I worked remote for her, a couple thousand miles away, micromanage the heck out of you.
Yeah.
And it was just, I promised myself I would never do that. And so now, I mean, yeah, a lot of us were definitely hitting our goals, but now my approach is if you're hitting your goals and you're meeting the expectations or exceeding the expectations, I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm not going to
Right.
say you need to be at your desk between this time and this time. Or, if you're working remote or if you're working in office, I'm not going to tell you how you have to spend your time. I'm not going to tell you, I'll make sure that you have the training and the understanding of the importance of solicitation calls and things like that, but I'm not going to count them. If you're hitting your goals, I'm going to leave you alone. If you're not hitting your goals, these are the things that you need to be doing. And as long as you're doing those things, again, I'm going to leave you alone.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to, I don't have to come after you and say, why didn't you make your 20 solicitation calls this week? Your numbers are going to show whether you're doing the things you're supposed to be doing or not.
Right. Yeah.
And
isn't it funny how sometimes the best teachers are not the positive ones?
Right.
Whether they
Yeah.
be experiences or people or, situations. Like I know a number of things in my life have made me who I am today, whether it's leadership or as a husband or a father or whatever, um, just based on situations and people that I've come across in my life who were horrible examples of what not to do.
Mhm.
And then in your own mind, you start thinking about, well, why is that so bad? Well, it's so bad because of, all these three reasons or whatever. And then that really solidifies in yourself, like, wow, okay, I'm not going to do these things because I see the effect that they had on me, probably going to have the same effect on everybody else around me.
Mhm.
So, yeah, cool. Well, Tanya, do you have any final words of wisdom? Okay, no, I won't put you on the spot like that. I do have a final question for you, though. If
Okay.
you could give advice to your younger self 10,
Mm.
15 years ago about what you were going to be doing or whatever, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I might need a minute. Uh, I would say it's let go of the idea that you have to be everything to everybody
Mm,
because that's just not possible and you'll kill yourself trying to do that.
yeah.
Um, and so it's understand the importance of prioritizing um, the things that align the most with your values and making sure that you're making decisions both at work and at home that align with that
Mm,
versus trying to be who or what you think the organization or the people around you think you should be.
mm. There's wisdom there. I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah, I
Definitely
mean,
some lessons
that's
learned.
it is,
Yeah.
I know there from pretty recent lessons actually that there
Yeah.
are certain organizations that don't make sense for me.
Mm,
My leadership style does not match with every organization
yeah.
and my values definitely, and not that all my values have to align with a specific organization, but you can tell the tone pretty quickly
Hmm.
about whether or not something's going to align with you personally on a personal level. And
Yeah.
people might think that that's not important, but it is, especially as you get older.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I just did a video a couple weeks ago about, knowing your role and is this the right role for you? And if it's
Mhm.
not the right role for you, why isn't it? And how do you find the right role for you? And
Yeah.
that's something, I've learned in life, in leadership, and work, and family, like
Mhm.
all of the technology that's going on right now with this Zoom, with the camera and the microphone and all this other stuff. That is my wife. Because I am not a tech person. Like she's upstairs right now, um, connecting the printer to another computer because I tried it and it said error, and I was like, "Well, I'm done. I
I'm
can't even
done.
I can't even do this. Like it's supposed to do itself. How can I?" And so, anyways,
Kyle's in that boat with you. I have to
yeah.
show him how to use certain things on his phone regularly. And mind you, he's 10 years younger than me. So I have to show him his tech, which is hilarious. But I
Yes.
learned plenty from him too. So
Yeah. You know what I do with my wife is when I get a new phone or whatever, we get new phones at the same time so that
mhm.
she can teach me how to use it. She'd be like, your phone, you can just do this thing right here and it just does it. And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. But thank you. Thank you. Maybe we'll have a class tomorrow.
There you go.
But anyways, Tanya, I know you've got an appointment coming up that you've got to get to in 10 minutes. So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate the off-camera conversation as well.
Thank
And I
you.
just wish you the best because I know you've got a very busy couple weeks coming up. And
Mhm.
yeah, just knock it out of the park because I know you will.
All right. Thank you, Todd. I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.